Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. This is Dwight Woods, the Jeet Kune Rebel, and welcome to the I Love Jeet Kune broadcast number 47. This is the one about the value of sparring in Jeet Kune. You know, I was thinking about this. It's not restricted only to Jeet Kune. Come on, it's the value of sparring in martial arts, right? But this is the I Love Jeet Kune broadcast, so we can say that. So as you guys are logging in, if you'd be kind enough to say where you're logging in from and hit the like button, and feel free to continue doing so if I happen to say anything that is of significance or that you find insightful. I just realized that I may have made a login in error, but we shall push on through. All right. Yeah, I think I may have messed up something here, but we'll push on through and see how it goes. All right. So continue to log in. Say where you're logging in from. Hello, Michael Marcellus Brown. Greg Castillo, Frank Taylor. Hey, that's one of my old college buddies. All right. The origin story for today's broadcast, it came partly from reviewing episodes of the Jeet Kune dialogues with specifically Eric Paulson, Greg Nelson, Burton Richardson. But also a question that I got on Quora, which I haven't answered yet, so I haven't posted it on Facebook. But the question was about whether or not boxers ever lose against their sparring partners, right? So to get this started, you'll have to indulge me for a second and listen to this story from my early days of training classical martial arts in Barbados, right? So on the one side, we had the group that believed that kata was supreme and more important than sparring. And that because it was in kata, according to them, that you found the essence of the art, right? In the kata and the kihon practice. And then, of course, there were the ones who saw it completely opposite. And to them, the sparring, the kumite, was the most important aspect, because that was where you proved your ability, right? So for me, of course, most things, the answer is probably somewhere in the middle instead of being at either extreme, right? And so in the classical martial arts, maybe the thing that they should have emphasized was the sanbon kumite, the three-step sparring, or the ippon kumite, because that was the bridge that connected you between kata and kihon, and then jiu kumite, which is the free sparring, right? So that was pretty much the atmosphere into which Bruce Lee descended in the 1960s and 1970s, where in the classical arts there was this debate, let's call it, between the kata and the kumite, and Bruce Lee came along and talked about things like dry land swimming and about having to get in the water, right? So let me ask you a question, right? And then you guys can comment on this. So when Bruce Lee talked about dry land swimming and having to get into the water, did he mean that if I'm going to learn how to swim, or if I'm going to teach someone how to swim, that you just jump in or throw them into the deep end of the pool, right? Because that's probably the best way to find out quickly whether or not you know how to swim, right? That's one approach. As a matter of fact, one of these days, remind me to tell you guys about my learning to swim. Harold Tull from Barbados is watching. Harold might remember, I think it was called Costain Beach, which was across from the deep water harbor in Barbados. And that's where I learned to do what I thought was swimming. But that's another story for another time. So this idea of jumping into the deep end, that is one approach, but it might not always work out in your favor, right? and I'm not sure, I didn't look this up, so I'm not sure exactly when it was in his evolution that Bruce Lee started calling for the use of protective gear, like the body protectors and the headgear and what have you. But ultimately, there's no argument that Bruce Lee and his followers in Jeet Kune became known as the leading purveyors of the full contact sparring, the all-out sparring. Now, that full contact sparring, that will work out pretty well for somebody like Bruce Lee, who was never a guy that was trying to build the membership at his martial arts school, right? Whether it was for adults or for kids, right? In fact, if you listen carefully to the stories about the Kali Academy, because we've had some people on in recent times that have told us stories about the Kali Academy, you'll hear that in some instances, when Richard Bustillo, for example, when Richard Bustillo said, okay, next class, bring your 16-ounce boxing gloves, that overnight, the number of people attending the class would be drastically reduced, right? You could also hear stories about the huge degree, the whole heap of experimentation that went on at the Kali Academy. And you guys are going to have to excuse me for a second. I knew I messed up something. I didn't bring my reference books of it. They're across the room. Give me 1 second. Talk amongst yourselves and just take a look at my artwork. Okay, I'm back. They weren't as far away as I thought they were, right? The favorite, pages 118. I hope I can pull this off and show you exactly what it is I mean, right? So look at this, right? So here, let me get it right. Yeah, okay. So look at them doing the stick sparring, right? The knife sparring with all that gear. And then on the other page, there's the kickboxing sparring, right? But again, maybe not so much with the headgear, but definitely with the gloves and the body protectors and the shin gear and the groin stuff and what have you. And Tanya Subing talked about the experimentation that went on at the Kali Academy. So the value of sparring was long ago established in the JKD training, right? But how to go about it. So as I stated earlier, the only thing between the forms practice and the free sparring was the 1-step or the 3-step sparring. But by JKD standards, 1-step sparring would lack the requisite aliveness that you need to translate it into realistic application, right? So again, back when I had my school, before I started just the small group stuff, I can recall that parents would come over, they'd bring their kids over from another school where they were unhappy, and they'd complain to me about their kid getting beat up, and I would question them, and invariably the scenario would be everybody warms up together, you do your practice, you do your basics together, and then you split off according to your belt level to do like your specific requirements. And then everybody would come back together towards the end of class, and you'd put your little hand stuff on and your little foot stuff on, and then they'd beat the crap out of each other. And invariably, the not so aggressive kids get beat up by the naturally aggressive kids. And so now they went to learn how to not be bullied, and the place where they went to learn how to not be bullied, they end up being bullied there too, right? And so a lot of people found the approach at my school, which we'll get into in just a bit, they found that to be a welcome respite from that idea, right? So okay, so it's not really a secret, right? But we'll call it a secret. How do you bridge the gap between the practice of techniques and then applying those techniques in sparring? Well, for me, it came holistic drilling, right? And by that, I mean using, for example, using the striking equipment to build attributes, right? Distance, timing, coordination, speed, power, etc. Right? So if you're interested, I didn't bring it with me, but you guys should, even if it's going to cost you more than cover price, you should try to get your hands on Sifu Inasano's book, A Guide to Martial Arts Training with Equipment. I don't think, other than Chris Kent's app stuff, I think he has it on an iPhone app, Training with Equipment. I don't think anybody has ever detailed how to train with martial arts equipment as well as Sifu Dan and Sihi and Chris have done. So you should definitely take a look at that Guide to Martial Arts Training with Equipment, right? So you use the striking equipment, and obviously you know where I'm going with this, because you want to hit the equipment hard, but you don't necessarily want to hit your training partners hard, right? Greg Nelson was talking one time about in Thai boxing training, professional Thai fighters do not spar hard. They hit the equipment hard, and then they do the distance and the timing drills. Just like Sifu Dan explains it using an American football analogy. He says, you don't play a game in practice. What you do is you run specific drills, right? So drilling becomes really important. Even in his, I didn't pull this one either, but in his and Tackett's Jeet Kune kickboxing book, Chris and Tim talk about Sifu Dan's change to the Chinatown curriculum by adding the sophistication of the Filipino boxing drills, right? So the idea for me, the bridge was realistic drilling. So at my school, we have a saying, and we use an idea/approach that's called feed the way you fight. So if I'm feeding you the focus mitts, I don't stand around like a pad holder in some kind of static manner. I have to move with you like if both of us are in the ring. So you feed the way that you fight, right? That means that then when we transfer that from pad holding to glove drilling, now when I come at you, I'm not aiming at your handheld pads. I'm aiming at your head and body and legs. But I'll be moving almost identically to the way that I was moving when I was hitting the focus mitts or the kick shield or the Thai pads or what have you, right? Does that make sense? Okay, go ahead and comment on that, right? So I don't know, but to me, I think that maybe that was something that Cedro Bruce appreciated about the boxers, because when you look at what boxers do, I don't know of anything that boxers do, even when they're out jogging, when they're doing their road work, because a lot of them practice footwork when they're doing the road work, and a lot of them move the arms around, shadow boxing, while they're doing the footwork. And then they go back to the gym, right? And they shadow box in front of the mirror, and then they hit the heavy bag, and then somebody holds the focus mitts for them, and everything is identical to the way that they will perform in the ring in a fight. You don't see boxers moving in a way, hitting the heavy bag, that they're not going to move when they're facing an opponent. And that was something that I think maybe Bruce Lee was one of the first people to realize that we should incorporate into martial art training, instead of the thing about doing the kata this way, but then you never use that. I remember once somebody down in Barbados saying, try to use what you do in kata, try to use it in your sparring. Well, yeah, I'm going to listen to my instructor. I tried to do it. It never worked, because this does not translate really well into free sparring, right? Anyhow, so to get back to it. So if you're a Jeet Kune Do enthusiast with a few training partners, or if you're an instructor with a large group or a small group like mine, it's up to you to design a method in which you bridge the gap between the basics and the sparring. And for me, that became what we call realistic glove drilling, right? So I'll try to break that down a little bit more for you. So I use what I call a blend of prearranged, and then I'm going to make up a word, free-arranged sequences, right? So there's prearranged sequences and there are free-arranged sequences. So you can start out safely by having everything prearranged. I know what you're going to attack with, and you know what I am going to respond with, right? And then maybe we keep the attack prearranged, but now my response is free-arranged, right? And so if anybody's not following me, make a comment and I'll clear it up in post editing, right? Then what we do is we add, because what we were talking about just now was just, let's call it the two-stroke approach, right? The attack and the response. But now we add the third stroke. So it's the attack, the response, and the counter. Now, the really astute JKD and Kali people on here will realize what I'm doing. It's learn the technique, add the counter, add the recounter, right? Which was, to me, that is like a classic, brilliant breakdown of how to approach martial art training. I don't know where you guys got it from. I got it from Dan Asano and Cas Magda, and I will be forever indebted to them for brilliance in martial art training like that. Forgive me, right? I don't mean to tangent off, right? So obviously, when you're doing that prearranged and free-arranged stuff, what you want to do ultimately is to diminish the amount of prearranged stuff that's going on. Because people's heart attacks over free sparring is just because of the element of the unknown, right? Sifu Dan talks about it. I was going to tell you about this later, but he talks about it in this book, Absorb What Is Useful, right? And again, even if it costs you more than the 10, you see it there? 10.95. Oh, I got to show you something. I'll tangent off again. You see the 10.95? I never paid 10.95 for it because look, I got it as a gift from Dan Asano, right? I'm such a moron. Anyhow, on page 123, I think. So these are photographs of what he, this was a 1982 experiment. So at that time, Sifu Dan had two places, right? He had the West LA place and he had the Torrance Academy. And so at one place, I think it was in West LA, they focused on realistic drilling. And then at the Torrance Academy, they focused on the sparring. And then the whole experiment was to bring the two groups together and have the sparring competition. My understanding is that no group won significantly over another group. But the people who were who focused more on the drilling, their form was a little bit better than the people who focused on the sparring. But it's not. But the result of the experiment was not that the sparring people perform significantly better than the drilling people, or vice versa, right? So another tangent, right? Because you got to do this thing that we're talking about: prearranged and free-arranged, and attack and response, and then counterattack. You have to do that for all of your training, for your striking, for your grappling, for your ground fighting, and even for your weaponry, right? So I'll tell you again. I'll tell you this, not again, because I may not have said this before. But what Mark Denny and the Dog Brothers, and Eric Naus and Mark Denny and the Dog Brothers did, and what Burton Richardson and his Battlefield Kali, what they have done for weapon sparring, I think in the JKD world, because it is JKD, that might be open up for discussion, but it is JKD, is immeasurable, right? Or at least let's say it was born out of JKD, if that sounds better, right? And on another tangent, I personally think that's why Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is so popular, because their form of sparring, aka rolling, is so much more enjoyable, and you're able to participate in that so much more easily than hard kickboxing sparring or even hard stick fighting sparring, right? So to borrow a phrase again from Chris Kent, this is what makes Jeet Kune Do both experimental and experiential, right? You've got to do the research and play around with the stuff, but then you learn from the doing. You learn from the experience. And that's also what puts Jeet Kune Do ahead of a lot of other arts, because it's not new. These books were all, some of these books are the Art and Philosophy book is from like 1976, right? The Absorb What Is Useful and what have you. This is stuff all from the 80s, 30-something years ago, and this is how far ahead of the group, the JKD group was, right? If you look, I couldn't find my first edition, so I have the new edition, and it's not new anymore, right, of Jeet Kune Do, the textbook. So in here, Chris Kent and Tim Tackett show again, right? There's a section here on developing your mental attitude through sparring. And then there's a depiction of different, what they call progressive sparring drills and even environmental sparring drills, right? So there's a ton of work to be done in this area, right, called sparring. And so it's a disservice to try to take people from knowing very little or knowing nothing at all and trying to get them into the free sparring, right, within a short period of time. You got to bring them up progressively. So I think that ultimately what we want to learn to do is how to spar safely with varying degrees of control and what have you. But that's why sparring is of paramount importance and paramount value in the JKD. All right, that is it for today. I messed up last week, so I'll do it now. There's the shirt, Greg Wilson, right? Can you see the whole thing? Because this is a big thing, right? And as we mentioned, shirts, right? You guys keep your eyes and ears open for the JKD Rebel online. I thought I had turned off my what do you call it? Do not disturb thing, so I got interrupted there. So feel free to share, like, comment, ask questions. I will. I'll go through everything post edit, and sign up for notifications for when we go live on Facebook, and at some point we will also be going live on the YouTube, right? But subscribe over on the YouTube to both the I Love JKD broadcast channel and the Jeet Kune Do dialogues channel. Quick heads up, I Love JKD quick skill series available at ilovejeetkunዶ.com. Coming up on Friday, we have a double header. One of them I'm going to be doing off camera, and I have to do it. I had intended for October to be the ladies of Jeet Kune Do, but I have to do this with this guy because he's not going to be available in November or December. So coming up on Friday, October 12th at 3 p.m. Miami time, we will dialogue with Eleanor Academia Magda, right? And then off camera, later that evening, I will dialogue with Tommy Carruthers. And then that one I'll have posted by 10 p.m. on Saturday the 13th, right? So Friday, October 12th, 3 p.m., live on Facebook with Eleanor Academia Magda. And then Saturday I'll post it and I'll let everybody know when it's up with Tommy Carruthers, right? I think that's it. Okay, so thanks everybody for logging in and spending some time with me. I'll see you back here next week, same time, for another issue of the I Love Jeet Kune Do broadcast. Until then, enjoy the rest of your day. This is Dwight Woods, the Jeet Kune Do Rebel, signing off. You guys take care.